243 West 20th Street from the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, DCAS, to EDC. EDC will enter into a new lease with non-traditional employment for women, a non-for-profit organization that has occupied the building since 1987. Everyone sort of knows this building affectionately as the Women's Building. Mm-hmm. Okay? Yes.
I didn't realize that myself. I learned something new.
Yes, it is the Women's Building. Awesome. So this action will allow new, the current lease ends in 2022 to receive funding for capital improvements. And then there's a section there that talks about how in the city charter that it allows for the sale or lease of property to take place via a mayoral directive. And we will not be voting on this measure, this borough board, but in November, folks will vote on it. So this meeting is just to talk about the exchange of the lease and if folks have any questions about it, okay? So Morgan, take it away.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good to see everyone again. Another 384B4. Again, my name is Morgan Alexander Jones from the New York City Economic Development Corporation. I'm also joined by my colleague, Robert McFadden, who's from our Asset Management and Revenue team over at EDC. He'll be joining me on this presentation as well. We also have representatives from non-traditional employment for women that are here today, actually. The president, I say president or executive president? President, yep, of NEW's here as well to answer any questions as well too. So just in general, really quickly, I think some of you are familiar with 384B4 and how that works. Some of you may not be. So just to give kind of a quick primer on that. So 384B4 is a part of the city charter, and it essentially is about the disposal of city property to some form of a private entity, and generally this could be through a sale or through some sort of lease. And so in this case, it's looking to extending a lease to new. Generally, how 384B4 works is, first we reach out to the borough president's office. Obviously, this is through Borough Board, where we're presenting this 384B4 as per the city charter. And through the Manhattan Borough Board, it's highly suggested and recommended and mandatory that we reach out to the community board as well as city council office, which in this case it's Speaker Corey Johnson's district, as this is located in Chelsea. So on the 15th of this week, we presented to the Chelsea Land Use Committee on Community Board 4, hi Burt, and we received a really positive response from that committee when we presented this. And a few questions came up, namely around what's the purpose of this 384B4, how to move the process forward, which are some topics that Robert's going to go into very briefly. So, so we presented this past on the 15th. We're here for Borough Board to give a presentation, as Lucille stated just now. We will return to the full board in early November, so we'll see you again, Burt. And then we will come back for the actual vote that will include this Borough Board again on November 15th. So that's essentially the very general basic guidelines of the 384B4 and how it works for those, again, not familiar. And I'm going to pass it on to Robert, who will go into more of the details about this project. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Robert McFadden. I'm a senior associate in the Asset Management and Revenue Department of the New York City Economic Development Corporation. And I'm here to speak today about non-traditional employment for women, or new, and their lease options at 243 West 20th Street in Chelsea. To give you some background, non-traditional employment for women, new, founded in 1978. It is a sector-based workforce development program that helps put women in non-traditional vocations centered around construction, transportation, energy, and facility maintenance industries. This gives women access to high-skill, union jobs averaging $17 an hour, and since 2005, NEW has graduated over 1,300 women. They have partnered with unions, contractors, and owners to increase the number of women working in these trades across New York City. I want to talk a little bit about the current lease at 243 West 20th Street, the Women's Building, as you've said. Also a former firehouse as well, very historic building. It was leased to new and has been administered by DCAS, Department of City Administrative Services, since 1987. It is a great location because it is central, because it is in Manhattan. and for all of News trainees. This current lease expires in 2022, and the dilemma we have here is that the Office of Management and Budget has allocated funding to New in order to complete capital repairs, but they are unable to access that funding because the lease ends in such a short amount of time. And so EDC is basically is partnering with Blue to kind of help them out here and to transfer that lease over to EDC so we can extend them a longer lease and they can access that funding and they can reinvest in this building. Per the current lease, DCAS must conduct a sealed bid auction at the end.
So Robert, they have no intention or desire to buy the building?
No.
Only lease it and renovate?
I believe that is the case, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, this is a very simple diagram of EDC's recommended solution. Basically, we're going to propose that through a mayoral directive, Section 384B4, the city transfers the property to EDC. EDC would then administer or release a new lease, draft a new lease, and extend that to new, non-traditional employment for women. This would allow, this long-term lease would allow New to access their stalled capital funds and proceed with renovations and give them a fair degree of certainty that they're going to be there for the next 30 years or so.
Can you do that without competition and extending that lease if it was transferred to you?
You know, that is very, very much a concern. We have done this before.
Okay.
I think you have to make, and I'll get to this on the
I'm
next
sorry.
page.
No worries.
You have to
Good
make
question.
it.
Really good question.
That's fine, that's fine. There are concerns about that, and we must show that leasing to New is a public benefit. We have to demonstrate that New's lease would be in the public interest, which if you understand their mission and how long they've been working in the community, I really believe that is so. They have great community support. I believe that New, their mission aligns with the mission of the city and the Economic Development Corporation. Yes, we do have to certify that this is permissible under the PAAA. And we also are showing and believe, it is evident that New would not be served in a better position, would not be served if they were in a different location. That the Chelsea location really is great for them because it is very centrally located, and they have trainees coming from all over the 5 boroughs.
No disrespect to all of our various community boards that are here, and they're lovely neighborhoods as well. So.
And that is the end of my presentation. We're here to answer any questions. Representatives from New are also here as well.
Which board is that? Is that 4?
Four.
Have you guys addressed it yourselves?
I went to the land use committee last week, and it'll come up to our full board the first week in November.
Any concerns out of it?
Not really. I'm double checking. As most of you know, I'm not Burt.
Oh, sorry. I messed up.
He's got about 25 years and a lot less hair than
No,
I do.
thank you.
I'm checking with the land use committee to see if there was anything that wasn't covered, because since I'm just filling in, I was not aware of this. But I know it was presented to land use, and I know that if there were any concerns, I probably would have heard about them.
Yeah, we didn't, I'm speaking obviously on behalf of EDC here, but we didn't get any concerns. And what their response was is that they wanted to pass a motion to be able to move this forward, and they actually asked questions to how can we get the mayor to push this forward and move it forward. And we said it is already in front of him as an alignment with what we're trying to do as a city to move this all forward as well.
I have a question for you. Is there some kind of policy or help? Construction guys, with all due respect, I like doing construction mediations, arbitration, catcall. And so I'm wondering if there's been any issues with women on job sites in construction, and if you have a mechanism or something to help bring and deal with that.
Yes, so yes and yes, right? So it's a big part of our program. So we serve, anywhere from 300 to 400 women a year just in our core training, and we see about 8 times as much that come through our doors and are interested in our program and maybe come back later. So it's a big part of from the beginning in terms of our information session about maybe you want to do this work. That's still a reality, that the numbers, especially in New York City, are growing because of our program and others, but the numbers are still, certainly in the certainly the reality is you might still be the only woman on a job site or one of few, and so that's part of our programming in terms of talking about how to work in that environment, and then we also have some programming in terms of working with contractors and owners and developers in terms of changing the culture. So it's a long-term work, but we're doing the work. Yeah.
No doubt.
Do you,
Good for you.
do you have any recent initiatives that you could sort of talk to us about that you all have been working on, showcase
Yeah,
the work you're
yeah, so, I mean, one of the initiatives that we've been working on for a while is the Signature Projects Program, and so that's in terms of not only getting women into the trades, but making sure that they make it through their 4 to 6 year apprenticeship and beyond. And so we work with owners and developers throughout the city. So we've developed sample contract language that folks like Turner and Lend-Lease and others put in their contracts, and put a goal for tradeswomen for the life of the project. So then we meet with the subs. If the subs don't have women on the project from a certain trade, we help make that connection. We stay in touch with all of our graduates. We've had a set aside from working with the city and working with the, including the Department of Labor and working with the trades here in the city. So we've had a set aside since 2006, which is when each apprenticeship class starts a new class, they set aside a percentage. It used to be 10%, and so this year at our annual luncheon, we announced that it went to 15%. So that's a 50% increase. So it allows us to place a lot more women this year and in the coming years into the trades.
Are there pipelines for unions?
What's
Are
that?
there pipelines for unions?
Yes, so that's part of our success is we have that direct pipeline since like 2006, working with the city and the mayor's commission at the time, and so that's continued in different iterations, and then we've just increased that by 50%, our direct pipeline, to allow more opportunities.
Is there any opportunity for feminists to become entrepreneurs and MWBE?
Yeah, we've seen some of that. We certainly partner with the MWBE community, and then we've seen some of our graduates certainly go into leadership positions within the trades, but then also start their own businesses, and we have some programs to help them do just that.
Can you come to and speak to our board?
Yes, I'd love to. Actually.
I just wanted to echo that. We would love that. It's something that's really been hitting hard on, especially for women in the trades. There's several members, including our chair of language, that Terri's very passionate about as well. So we'd love to thank you for coming.
Great.
Could maybe we get contact and reach out maybe to
If you want to
Yeah.
give me the electronic
Absolutely.
version, and we can send
Yeah.
out information.
Great,
But
great.
we don't have your contact.
You don't have my contact information. I'll hand out cards though.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
When-
I would love to, yes.
Percentage of people that actually go on to full employment,
Yeah.
is that promoted or publicized, or what I can share that with?
Yeah, so so 75% of the women that go through our core program graduate the first time around. Some have to come back again. We have a really strict program because they have to then be ready to work in the
100%.
trades. And then we do a lot of advanced training, and so 75% of our graduates get placed, and we're in the trades, and we're in other, opportunities as well in terms of utilities and transportation and energy. Con Ed is a big employer, and then retention is 1 year retention is now up to like 75% or something like that.
So to follow up on that,
Yeah.
again, this is, I'm new
Just
to this,
interested,
so. Are your folks, by virtue of being apprentices or in that program,
Yeah.
is that how they move into employment?
Yeah.
Or is it because of your outplacement work?
So once we consider ourselves a pre-apprenticeship program, and then once they get placed, they're an apprentice, so they're
They're on that
employed.
track.
They are starting to make, it's an average, from all the apprenticeships, it's an average of 18 something an hour to start, and it's full benefits for themselves and their families. We serve a lot of single moms. And then their wages increase throughout their apprenticeship, which is anywhere from 3 to 6 years, and they increase every 6 months or every year. And then when they're journey level, then they're at that high salary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Question. In terms of returning citizens formerly incarcerated,
Yeah.
what type of accommodations are?
Yeah. Returning citizens, it's a case by case in terms of the employers that we work with and what their requirements are. And then reentry is a population that we serve pretty heavily, and that's always been a nice, it's always been a nice partnership with the trades in terms of serving reentry folks, and so we've seen a lot of success there.
So it would be for referrals to be placed to you, or do you actually go recruit?
Both. Both. We have, my recruitment manager does go to some of the facilities as well. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Oh, in terms of long term, I know you mentioned the word 30 years. Is it more than 30 years? Is long term defined as 30 years for you?
We haven't reached an agreement. We haven't kind of drafted up a lease, but it would be probably something at least with 30 years.
It's a part of a negotiation discussion, so yeah, that's how it works.
All right, but you don't foresee anything less than 30 years?
No.
30, okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having
Really
us. Thank you. We
appreciate it.
appreciate everybody. Thank you for your service as well.
Thank you. Okay, everyone, moving right on along. So we have the Borough President's Report, which I'm actually gonna have Aldrin start. If you could talk about the census trip next Tuesday.
Oh, yes. Many of you should have heard about this, but the flow of information in New York City is always an interesting topic. So we've communicated with our district managers and community board chairs, and I'm sure they've passed on the information to the rest of the community board. But as you all know, the census, the decennial census is coming up in 2020. It happens every 10 years. Normally, prior to the decennial census, the federal government conducts about 6 end-to-end rehearsals or dry runs in Puerto Rico, in a rural area, a big metropolitan area, suburban area, just to get a sense. But this year, or this time around, the federal government is only going to conduct one census dry run, and that is in the city of Providence. And that's what they're going to base the whole 2020 operation on, the experience in that one city. So on Tuesday morning, at 8:30 in the morning, we're going to be taking a delegation from New York to Providence, Rhode Island. I know David Ford is one of the members that will be attending. We extended the invite to all chairs and all DMs. I know Padmore will also be attending, and several other community board chairs. But we're going to be going to Providence, Rhode Island to get a briefing from their mayor, their complete count committee, and their census director as to how it went and what are things New York City should be preparing for in regards to the undercount and a variety of other things. One thing that the dry run did not include was the citizenship question that many people are concerned about, because that's still being adjudicated. But so that was not included in the dry run, and the citizenship question does manage to appear on the census form. Then it's like a reset button, because the whole dry run that they did is not much we can really extrapolate from that, and then we're just gonna go on 2020 based on that new set of information. As well as, for the first time, the federal government is going to shift from a paper questionnaire. They're going to try to do the whole thing online, or through the phone, or through mobile. So that's going to be an interesting shift in 2020. The consequences of which we have to live with for the next 10 years. And there are huge consequences. The very one of which is, for the last 70 years, New York State has lost 1 congressional seat every decade for the last 70 years. And if that trend continues, then it doesn't bode well for us. And that's just on the federal representation level. It affects funding and all kinds of other issues. So Tuesday, if you have not signed up and you're a community board chair, community board district manager, or someone in the community board that's very, very much interested in this, please do so. The link was sent to you in the email to the chairs and the district manager. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And also, speaking of which, did everyone receive my email on electoral advocacy this past week? Were there any questions, anything? Yes.
We had a question the other night. If we passed a resolution that's in our minutes that prior to the as well. So if the question is this, if a board member is at a public forum, can the board member say, I'm speaking as a private person, not as a member of CB7, And CV7 has had passed a resolution in August on thus and such. Is that?
Yes and yes.
Yes.
Yes and yes. One is a public record, and the other one, the person speaking in the personal capacity.
So they could say that?
Yes.
Yes.
This may have been clarified already, but just as far as the implementation of the measure goes through.
Mhm.
And I've read it, it says it applies to new members and existing members. So does that mean if it goes through come next year, someone puts their application in, if they're on 8 years already, 12 years already, they're just off immediately? Or do
No.
they get sort of a new, a fresh 8 years?
How does this work, Jessica?
It's actually kind of complicated. They have a whole.
What's clear to me?
It depends upon
which class you're in.
Yeah, they have a whole strategy for making people all go off at different times, so not everyone will just wholesale be off, even if they've been on for 8 years or 10 years or 20 years. So it would be staggered depending on when your term expires.
But
Within the next 4 to 5 years, there would be a complete turnover of people who've been on for more than 8 years.
so yeah, so I was confused as well about
Yeah,
that
yeah,
because
so
I didn't
it's
know if
very
people get if you get grandfathered in or something, you get 8 years from now.
If you're the way I understand it, though, if you're reappointed next April, the class of 2019, you will get 8 years from that point, no matter how long you've been on the board.
All right.
If you're reappointed in April of 2020, you get 10 years. So you'll have till 2030, no matter how long you've been on the board, because they're trying to ameliorate the loss of institutional knowledge that some of us are very concerned about. I'm trying to figure out what I can say and what I can't say since I'm sitting at the city office. But that's the way it's written right now. So if you're class of 2020, you got another 10 years to go before you're tossed off, but you'll be tossed off like everyone else when that time comes.
Yes.
There was an excellent op-ed written by Borough President Brewer that has appeared in some of our local publications. It was written by a private person. Is there any bar to our just sending it around as an FYI? Just, here's an article you may be interested in.
I think as a private citizen on your.
No, it would be on, like I'm saying.
You have to do both. If you have an op-ed on one side, you have to send around information on the other side the same way as if you were holding the forum.
No.
If you did it in official capacity.
Yeah, I was hoping to
The
put it
other
on
thing, though,
CBT's
for
Facebook.
many of you have seen already, though, that the board president's actually been attending each board this month, and she's doing it first as borough president and then as a private citizen, and so she is actually speaking. She's wearing 2 hats, and she'll do that at each board meeting. If you haven't seen her already, she'll be at the board meeting this coming in the next few weeks.
But we can't blast it to our multi-thousand member.
Unless
Yes.
you
have to
present
do both
I'm not all
a balanced
interested in that.
perspective. And I
Oh, actually, good. Jim came in right at the opportune moment.
don't run, Jim.
Yeah.
But I do know, for instance, so CB8 is helping to organize all of the boards to work on this, which is great. So in addition to having folks, it needs to have a balanced perspective, and so I know that the district manager was asking about having some of the other borough presidents from other boroughs attend, because some of them are not in alignment with the way that Gail feels on this topic. And that would provide the balanced perspective.
Although the mayor's commission is sending out one-sided emails
And
as the
certain
commission.
council members are speaking with their council hat on and sending emails from council accounts advocating for this.
One way.
One way.
There is a great disparity between how some people who are not supposed to, the message is not supposed to be doing that, who are doing that. And it's been the city commission, the mayor's commission, so-called educational forums really trouble me personally, because I don't see how people who wrote this, who have a vested interest in having it passed, who have no other speakers at these educational forum, are able to present it as educational. And I feel that our hands are so tied.
But theirs aren't.
Further to that point, the reports I've gotten from the commission's educational forums is they are presenting it completely one-sided.
Well, yeah, the emails have been absolutely one-sided.
Okay, so to that extent, since we can't discuss it any further here, there was an article in Gotham Gazette yesterday that Gail has organized as in a private citizen, and I'm just reporting what was in the Gotham Gazette, that she has organized a independent expenditure committee to actually fight these things. I will tell you as an aside, when I'm not acting as first vice chair of CB4, I am the treasurer of that organization, and I am happy to discuss this with any of you after we are done here.
Yes. Xavier?
I just think in general, just speaking on a personal level, I do feel that optics are very skewed one-sided. And there are a lot of people in the community who's here, and they especially after our rezoning we went through, they feel like this is another totalitarian grab. And I think that's a lot of the concern we're hearing. And we're trying to find ways in case things do go to mitigate. How do we enable and activate and store all of our institutional wisdom? So.
Yeah, no, this is, I don't know if Jim is still here, that he wants to address some of it, but.
He heard what we were talking about.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the way it sort of made sense to me, but then it didn't, is that you're supposed to treat the ballot initiative as if it were a candidate. But, so that made sense, but then when you see that there's an educational, advocacy agenda going around that treats this candidate as just one candidate, then I can see how it's confusing.
I mean, the mayor's charter commission put some items on the ballot. They can advocate for what they put on the ballot. They're the commission to put it on the ballot.
But they're advertising it as an educational
It's a question of
forum.
what they're saying. They're saying it's an educational forum. Obviously, it's not. They're advocating for their own positions. They're allowed to do that. Elected officials are not supposed to do that using city resources. Any elected official can do it not using city resources.
Actually, I was there when they voted on these ballot proposals, and every single one of them said that they would not advocate, that they were not allowed to advocate, that the only thing they could do was educate. They were all vehement about that, about the difference between education and advocacy, and that's partly why this is so frustrating, because they all almost took an oath about it, and yet here they are, not even attempting to present it in a balanced fashion. And yet Gail acts as though her hands are tied, as all the rest of us do, and as Scott Stringer does, and yet the other side is out there without, as Lowell pointed out, taking off their hats. All the commissioners are there presenting this. It's so steeped in some kind of unfairness. I won't use any other adjectives I could think of, that it's really appalling, and you have a population who likes term limits, so all they see are term limits, and that's what's being presented and advocating about.
They seem to think education means I'm going to educate you as to my point of view.
Yes. It's really troubling, and it would be nice to be able to stop it.
All right, so next agenda item, we're still working on our task forces. We have our closed Rikers task force, which I guess 2 weeks ago, the city held its public hearing on the siting, was met with a very loud and stiff opposition, if anyone was there. And Gail testified on wanting the administration to do away with the current process in order to start again on a community-led, focused, grounded process. We have testimony in the back if you have not read it. We also have our Mount Sinai Beth Israel task force that we've started meeting up again with the other area electeds. And then we also have our L-Train task force that will be meeting tomorrow on DOB. Basically, we've heard that there's a real increase in DOB permits around the L-Train construction. They're saying about 1,300 construction permits have been issued, which is an insane amount of permits when you consider the amount of disruption that the L-Train shutdown will produce. And so we had all of the agencies come in last month. So we had DOT, DOB, Department of Environmental Protection, MTA. We also had NYPD, FDNY, EMS to come in to talk about how all of these agencies will be operating before, during, and after the shutdown. But DOB actually was the one that presented most of the questions for folks. And so we're actually inviting them back tomorrow afternoon to have a discussion on what that looks like. And to just have them answer more questions to the satisfaction of all of the assembled stakeholders about what they're going to be doing with all of these construction permits. Maybe there can be a cap on new construction permits that are offered during this time in this particular neighborhood. We're looking sort of at a whole slew of different options. In addition, Young Leaders of Manhattan, this is our group of young people that work on different programming and initiatives out of our office. The applications are open now, and they're rolling through the end of the month. And so if you know any young people that you think would like to get involved, maybe the community board is not yet quite the place for them to be, but they want to do work with other young people, we really encourage them to apply. And it is on our website, so you can check that out. And then Luisa Lopez, our CB8, CB11 liaison, is sort of leading this for us now. So you can also reach out to her. We have a couple of events upcoming. So the first on Friday, November 2nd, is our What a Time, 50 Years of Art and Activism Celebrating Puerto Rican Heritage. It's going to be here in our art gallery. We're really excited. We're celebrating Taller Boricua's 50th anniversary with this amazing art show of Puerto Rican artists. So it's here Friday, November 2nd from 6 to 8 p.m. Then we also have a listing of all of our capital funding information sessions that we're holding both downtown and uptown. For schools, we are hosting that November the 7th from 4 to 6 p.m. here in this building right here. For nonprofits, November 8th from 1 to 3 p.m. here down at our building. And then we're doing the same presentations for school and nonprofits November 14th and 15th, both at the National Black Theater from 4 to 6 p.m. Here is the flyer. We have more in the back. Please encourage your area nonprofits to apply for capital funding. In addition, I've had the pleasure of speaking with pretty much every chair about what their needs are for this upcoming community board recruitment cycle, so I really appreciate everyone taking the time to speak with me. We will incorporate that into the process this year, and the hope is that we can use that to do some additional targeted recruitment for people, okay? So that's what I have in terms of the VP's report. We can now move on to chair report. Yes, you had a question?
No.
Oh.
Can we just give like a big round of applause for Lucille, who has worked so hard?
Oh. You're very kind. Thank you. So we are going to move on to chair reports. Anthony, do you want to?
Thank you. Couple of items. Hopefully I'll be brief. As you mentioned, we're all wrestling, or at least CB1 and 3 and other lower Manhattan, about the possible Manhattan detention complex. And we've all testified, and they've been pretty raucous. But we did a joint meeting between CB1 and CB3 before the one 2 weeks ago, which was much more controlled. But still, there's a lot of work to do to get community input here. Like all of you, I'm sure we're all working hard on the district's needs and budget requests, so that's a major activity. This month, CB1, because we've been in the process of reorganizing our committees, we launched a new transportation committee in October. And it's important because whether it's congestion pricing, overdevelopment because of large buildings, and this is a major issue, and I'll probably reach out to you all and see if we can have the chairs of our new transportation committee maybe learn some best practices from you all. A major activity is still the Seaport Advisory Group, because there's Howard Hughes has acquired a new property adjoining the historic area. There's the Newmarket property, which the city or EDC still owns. So it's a complex situation that we're working on. And then finally, we also want to share our concerns with CB3 about the resiliency issues and the recent changes and development there. We were shocked to learn about the additional $700 million that even recently the city claimed there was no more money. CB1 had to wait for years, and nothing's happened in almost 6 years, so we're concerned about that. And then finally, a more personal note, Terri and I spoke. Every so often we have a resolution, or we use phrasing. We had land use resolution, and the phrase Sohoization was there, and Terri, we apologize to CB too about the characterization, but it's so easy to make those mistakes. We share common interest in what's happening in development, land use, and the retail issues and all things. So, thank you.
Wonderful.
We'll use it as a teacher. We'll use it as a teacher.
Yeah, I learned a lot. Thank you.
So we are going to head to CB2, and I would just like to say that we just found out that this is Terri's last meeting with us as the CB2 chair. She will be handling some personal business for November, and November 30th is the last of her duties as chair. Personally, I would really like to thank you for your leadership. It is, I haven't met that many chairs that have been able to step away from their professional life for the duration of their term to fully embody their chairpersonship in the way that you have. Terri is at every meeting, day and night, and you really have given a lot to this board, and so we really just would like to thank you so very much. So now you can give your report.
I'll shorten it too. CB2, we have a lot of concerns about small business, as many of us do, and thank you to all the chairs who responded to my question about whether or not you're going to be doing a resolution prior to the city council vote, which I guess is going to be November or December. The hearing is next week on the SBJSA. So if anybody's, we may do a resolution. I'm not sure whether or not we'll actually take a position. Depends on what happens at the hearing. But small business is such a concern, economic development, the diversity of small business, the people who run it. There's just so much involved in that I'd like to, either me or the first vice chair will be serving for a month, and then we have our elections anyway. So basically, the way I figure it, if I had to fill in a month for my predecessor, I'm still doing my full term. Even sneaking out a month early due to family emergency. 550 Washington, which is next to Pier 40, is of course really important. There was something that happened that changed a large amount of affordable housing with an enormous amount, of course, of market rate housing into commercial. So while the north part of the site will still have some senior affordable housing, which is, that's a goodness, but all the rest of it didn't happen. So there's some disappointment there. So we're basically trying to figure out what we can do that benefits the community, or what the developer would agree to that is more beneficial than, say, an enclosed campus where people, go and then they eat their lunch and they socialize and everything on site. And I know other boards have had some of those happening. Another thing that I'd like to reiterate, Cranes and some other sort of business-oriented publications really like to move the ball along, whether or not it's appropriate, and introduce concepts that are, well, briefly, the M15 districts in CB2, including Soho and NoHo, city planning at the request of the borough president and the council member, are looking at the current zoning, what works, what doesn't, and then eventually what to do about it. Cranes, of course, said they're rezoning Soho and NoHo. So please, terminology, as Anthony said, terminology is very important. Examination of zoning is very different from, and they're rezoning it, and the developers and the owners are really into rezoning, and they're really trying to push it forward. So just please help us out by, letting us get through that process at all possible. Lastly, on the Manhattan Detention Center, we don't ever want to step across community board boundaries. But on the other hand, when the environmental assessment stops before the environmental impact will stop, that's a great concern. So we're just preparing a letter asking for the environmental issues, especially the traffic issues, that the potential Manhattan Detention Center it's in 3, right?
It's asked physically in one,
It's physically in
but
one,
so
and then,
close.
yeah. And then we're just
right next to
just
all the
sort of
traffic.
curving around you there. So we're just asking to be in the environmental assessment rather than activating on where the Manhattan Detention Center itself will be. And very lastly, it has been such an honor and a privilege to serve with each of you. You've been wonderful colleagues and support. And I'm still available by phone, email, and carrier pigeon. So.
Thank
and
you.
you're going to love Daniel. He's good.
Thank you, Terri. CB3, David.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm going to be brief. It's great that our board is able to work with other boards like Board 1 on the Manhattan Detention Center issue. I know Alicia was there, and I believe you guys co-chaired that one of the hearings that took place. We're working on the 2 bridges, the overdevelopment issues with that, continually having hearings. We're forming a task force with Parks for the Baruch Houses bathhouse. RFEI is going to be coming out soon, and the hope is that either a nonprofit organization or philanthropist would step in and recreate the space for community use. So that's what's on the wish list. Of course, we're chugging along with the L train shutdown issue. We had a bunch of people that did participate in the ride-along to survey riders to see what their feelings were about what's coming up. And this coming Monday, I'm chairing the City Charter Task Force for the board, so we're having our first meeting, and then on Tuesday I have the privilege of going on a road trip to Providence, Rhode Island, and then we have our executive committee meeting tonight. So that's it for now.
Wonderful, thank you, David. Lowell, CB4.
The big win this past month was Hartley House, which is a settlement house on West 47th Street. The people who run the building provides craft training and a lot of support for seniors, especially at-risk seniors. Organization that runs Hartley House had announced that they were going to sell the building because they could not support it anymore. And with the help of the speaker and a lot of effort from our board, they've announced that they're going to stay there.
Great.
They're going to, in addition, they're going to add supportive housing for at-risk seniors. So they're actually going to expand their mission because we were able to help put them together with the right affordable housing developers, and that was a big one. Thank you. We continue to work on the L train stuff because we're the end of the L train. We had charrettes. We had a charrette this past month, different committees, because we finally got the funding for blocks 5 and 6, which are parks in the middle of the Hudson Yards development. Yes, it's not just all tall buildings, there will be park space there, and we were hearing from the community about what they wanted in those parks. There's not really a lot of community there yet, since people haven't moved in yet, but the neighbors came in and told us what they wanted. We will be doing the same thing next month for Pier 97, which is at the end of 57th Street, where the Hudson River Park Trust has the money to go build that now. So we want to hear from the community about what they want there. We're continuing to try and fight to move the tow pound. I think that's pretty much it.
Wonderful. So, speaking of CB4, I would like to introduce Lizette Chaparro, who is our new urban planner covering that community board. Lizette, can you just stand up and tell us where you are coming from?
Sure. So before here, I was at Clinton Housing Development Company, which is in CB4, working closely with the Housing and Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm covering boards 4, 5, and 7. Thanks.
Wonderful.
Good to you.
Welcome.
We will.
And I know everyone has also met James Lloyd. Raise your hand, James. James is our new Director of Land Use here, and then you already know Orlando as well. Thank you to Land Use for being here today. So if you have any questions, please, for those areas, please contact Lisette. And I know that you all are also hiring another urban planner.
That's right, we're just waiting to hear back.
Wonderful, that's great. So that is also moving along. And then in terms also of community liaisons, we have just hired 2 new liaisons that will also cover community boards 3 and 4. And the person who is taking that job currently works for DSNY doing outreach. So they have a lot of experience working with boards, particularly in the downtown area. And so, yeah, we're excited about that. All right, CB5, Renee.
I am not Vicky, as a lot of you know. Renee Cafaro, I'm the treasurer, just filling in. So it's not actually handed anything in particular I needed to bring forth today on behalf of CB5. I mean, obviously we are still doing our usual work with the things happening in the East Midtown area. We're internally dealing with our transportation committee, trying to deal a lot of the new issues with a lot of new buses, looking for bus applications instead of being in the Port Authority. So those are sort of our landmarks issues. I'm the vice chair of landmarks. With some of the new changes on how landmarks is happening, we are seeing a lot less coming to community boards, which is concerning us quite a bit, especially since we have so many landmark districts and individual landmarks in our district. That is something that myself and our chair, Leila Lacasico, the chair of landmarks, are working on and being very proactive to try to get it in front of. One of the things we're obviously most concerned with was the issue that we had already talked about. We can't really talk about here. So thank you for discussing that. I think I'll report back on that. And we could talk about this offline, but personally, homelessness issues, I want to talk to you about what is going on 58th Street and shelter, and so I'm supposed to be on that cab, and I have not heard much about it since, and I don't know what's happening with that. So
at least the last conversation that I had with DHS was that since they're in litigation, everything has come to a screech and a standstill.
That's what I assumed.
And so this is for the Park Savoy Hotel that this was supposed to turn into a 150 person employment shelter. It's run up against a lot of virulent community opposition. So they're in litigation, and so it just means that everything is just really at a standstill. But at least from what DHS is saying, as soon as that piece is resolved, they're ready to move folks in.
From a legal standpoint, as far as our role as a community board, or perhaps me as a resident of that block, formerly of the budget committee, where one of the top 3 things we've always talked about is dealing with homelessness and needing shelters. Is there any role for us, or is it appropriate for us in any capacity to advocate on the side of the shelter during the litigation process? I know that we can't really testify or anything, but to whatever extent we could have, I don't know, op-eds or anything, because I feel like there's a lot of only the one side of the voice in the lawsuit.
And it's a very well-funded community opposed project, meaning that the community opposition
is very loud, and very rich.
Very loud, very wealthy, hired, some of the top lawyers in the city to fight against this. So absolutely. I mean,
I don't know what my legal rights are, and I don't want to overstep any boundaries or do anything, that I shouldn't be doing, but
I mean, I think first and foremost, just because of the community district it's in, it would be great to have the board have a resolution. I mean, I think that first and foremost to have the board's voice on that, and I know that folks have been a little reticent to maybe do that, but I think having CB5 say we are in support of this is a very helpful thing. And then I think, again, if you're finding that you have neighbors that want to be sensible about, having a shelter in the neighborhood, then reaching out to those folks and actually writing a letter, writing an op-ed, writing to DHS saying, we're willing to work with you all on these issues. We want to participate in the cab. We want to be supportive neighbors, all of that really helps.
Okay.
Jessica?
So just in addition, the Interfaith Coalition on Homelessness and Housing, Mark Greenberg's group, they've done some organizing work in support of this shelter and other shelters. They, you probably know them, but they've done letter writing, they do flyers and outreach in the community, meetings and stuff, so you might want to look up at that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
All right, great. Thanks.
CB6. Hi.
I wasn't going to mention the 30th Street shelter, but we do have several shelters in CB6, and we have cabs, and they are, knock on wood, even 30th Street shelter, which used to have a lot more problems, it's really running smoothly. They're doing great renovations. It's a beautiful old building. But I think that just oversight and all of those things, kind of like making sure that they're run well. But it's good. We all need to have our fair share of those sites. So I feel like if you want CB6 to help with the CB5 issue, I know it's the same city council person too who is working on it. So.
That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
I'll give you my contact info. I think it's important for people to understand that we all need to share this burden together as a city.
Yeah.
And thank you.
And I just on behalf of Lucille, as her last final gift going out is the Washington Irving School Task Force. We met yesterday again, so it's a monthly meeting, and I really feel like DSNY and the SCA and all the schools on the call, and there's a construction project that's maybe another year and a half because there are some issues. It's this really old building on Irving Place, and the neighbors now are not complaining about the trash, they're complaining about their issues are noise issues, which I really feel like, we need to meet in person, but anyway, it's the calls are not very productive, so that it's a monthly call, and you kind of started that or asked for that from the community, and we're moving forward with it. But that's just on the final note. I wasn't even going to mention it, but if we are, we're continuing to talk and trying to make it right for the community and have full transparency with all these city agencies that aren't really necessarily always as transparent, or, they have a lot of data that they don't necessarily want to share. So it's moving forward, but so thank you, Lucille, for kind of getting that started. I hope that we can, we'll just keep on it. So the DDC, with the resiliency project on the East River, it affects Community Board 6, 14th Street to 25th Street. So we're on top of that as well. We went to the the CB3 Parks Committee meeting last week, and the mayor's office and DDC doesn't have a lot of new information, although it's definitely CB3's. There are a lot of big East River Park might go away for a long time. But so we have some other Sty Cove and some other areas that might be affected. We're still waiting to hear, and they want to come to us the 1st of November. So they have more information for our land use and waterfront committee meeting November 8th. And then we're of course on the L-Train task force. And we'll be at the meeting tomorrow here at your offices. We have a new waterfront task force, which isn't necessarily related to the resiliency, but we'll be talking about, we're working with some schools and the Waterside Plaza, and there's a heliport, and we have, just elevated parking along our waterfront, which is kind of a sad use of our waterfront. So we're walking through with Parks DOT and EDC in the next few weeks with this newly formed task force with our electeds and the city agencies. The sanitation trucks continue to be a problem. I mentioned that last time. They're still parking on our streets. So we are trying to find locations and work with them, but it's a big issue. And finally, we finalized, but I think we're going to go back and we finalized our district needs statement really early. We were like, woohoo, we're done. But we do have bus layovers, and that's a big problem, I think, throughout the Manhattan. There are all these commuter buses and MTA buses just laying over in the bus lanes, and crazy spots, turn lanes that don't make any sense. So we were talking about, as we may need a sanitation garage, or we have a sanitation garage coming to Community Board 6, which there are trucks, they need a place to park. So, but maybe we can, as our district needs, we might add something about a bus depot or some kind of, the buses need a place to stop as they can't just head back to Queens and come back. It doesn't make any sense for them to do that. So we're trying to find solutions and perhaps include that in our district needs for next year.
So Gail had a conversation this week with Commissioner Garcia about the issue in CB3 related to sanitation trucks parking in neighborhoods. And so we're starting to see this because they were kicked out of, basically they were kicked out of their space related to Javits Center at around 29th and the West Side Highway. And so now there are about 20 different trucks that are sort of circling the East Village neighborhood trying to find parking.
And in NYCHA housing.
And in
on 26th
NYCHA,
Street, yeah.
exactly. And so it's become a real community issue. Gail spoke with the commissioner and specifically brought up the sanitation garage in CB6 and how, because there's been no movement on this, it's now having this exponential impact on all these other neighborhoods. And so I just think it's a reminder to us how interconnected we are. So even if, the garage, their space was closed all the way on the west side, now we're seeing CB3, having a lot of those issues, obviously CB6, some of those things also sort of creeping their way to you all as well. So it's something to keep in mind. They're all sort of furiously trying to find space. DOT has been really trying to help them find space. We're actually writing a letter to DCAS and DOT to ask them to really look at city-owned spaces to see if there's anything that can be accommodated. I know that Councilmember Margaret Chen has felt some concern about them parking near Pier 34, which is near Basketball City and other neighborhoods in NYCHA. So again, all of these things are so interconnected. Board by board, but it's something that we definitely have talked about.
We've offered to find them locations, and they need what do they call them? Their stations.
Mm-hmm.
They need stations where they can, have lunch and their
depots. Yeah.
But they're smaller little mini. Anyway, there's a terminology, but they're small stations that need to have the sanitation trucks parked near. And the one on 26th there's one at 24th and 2 or 3 blocks away. So they're so we need to find places that have those facilities for them as well. So.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you.
And I did want to say, Terri, Lucille, thank you so much for everything, and I'm going to miss both of you very much.
Thank you. CB7.
I'd like to start with a couple of semi-win things. We had parking day, we took 4 parking spaces, and I can send pictures around. We had dance performance, we had music. It was really a phenomenal day. I recommend, I think it's the 3rd Monday of September. It's a national day. I know there was one in Ward 5 by Rockefeller Center. It's just a fabulous day that the DOT gives you 3 or 4 parking spaces, and you can do whatever you want with it. So we're gonna have our task force meeting next week, and I will send out information about that. The other big win is and I'm sorry Padmore's not here, our NYCHA task force has influenced so many members of the board that when we did our budget, we have a steering meeting once a year where we trade horses and prioritize our budget needs. And NYCHA got first place this year, which has never happened before. So that was a big win. We are having our charter revision working group that will meet in 2 weeks for the city council charter. Our big problem, and we have we met with our new urban fellow who's going to look at all the affordable housing on the Upper West Side. And we're hoping it'll be a model that with what websites he's using and when he's using them, so that we can, other boards can replicate it. The other big thing is this creeping super tall buildings on the upper, that are impacting Central Park. So yesterday we came up with an idea that all the boards that border Central Park have resolutions talking about the need to keep shadows and environmental protections for Central Park. Someone is working on a draft resolution, so hopefully we'll have that for you. The 66th Street, 65th Street border is going to impact the east side as well as the west side when construction is underway. So when we get to that point, we'll let board use the large 8 minutes. And Monday night, I don't know if any of you have this problem, but we had a group that is unhappy that the museum is building the Gilder Center, and they came to a meeting and were very disruptive and really harassed us quite a bit.
Thank you. We were just joined by our illustrious council member from the Upper East Side, and we were just about to get to CB8.
Oh, wait.
Alita?
Okay, well, first, all of the boards are partnering on the educational city charter town hall set for November 1st, so we're really pleased about that. We've been having a lot of meetings, so there'll be another one next week on more planning, and I sent her an email to all of the board chairs, so thank you all for your participation. We have a big problem with Fetner infill project at NYCHA. George Janes, an urban planner, wrote a letter about how it violates the zoning resolution in quite a number of ways, and yet there's a mayoral runaround the zoning. He has the, I guess
Sponsored by Pfizer.
The ability.
The mayoral runaround was not sponsored by Pfizer,
it's a mayoral override.
Yes, of the zoning. So we're really concerned about that and the amount of affordable housing that it's not providing. I personally think that any infill project should have 100% affordable housing, but it's not, and it will have 50%. So we are having a joint meeting of zoning, housing, and the Health and Senior Services Committee at the end of November, I think, to try and deal with this. Small business, there are a lot of initiatives coming out of the Small Business Committee to help keep retail and interesting retail in the neighborhoods. We have an urban planning fellow, appointed to the Small Business Committee, so that will be good. We just have funding, thank you very much, Councilmember Kalos, with Councilmember Powers to live stream the board meetings through June. So we're really glad about that. It started last night, aside from some technology quirks. We're hoping to get it smoothed out and keep going. I think people in the community will be really happy. And that's about it for that. And we have our continual zoning issues and trying to get a height limit on avenues 3rd, 2nd, 1st, and York. The city has not yet been responsive.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, and Lucille, and Terri, we will really miss you.
Thank
Maybe
you.
we should just get portraits the way they do it in the White House, and just put them up on the walls.
Well, thankfully for all of you, I'm really not going that far, so so you can start yelling at me in my new capacity very shortly.
I look forward to partnering with you and working with you and Andy Byford to turn around the transit, and in a situation where he's coming to the city council to ask for $40 billion. It seems like $1 million for a bus route between 96th Street on the east side and the west side is a rounding error, which I shared with him in person, but I hope that you can advocate from the inside for us. I wanted to first just start off by thanking everyone for engaging on the charter stuff. I know that the borough president's been out there, and I know folks were concerned about the fact that there's different standards for different agencies. The law department is the attorneys for, unfortunately, the community boards, which is something that Gail Brewer actually has raised issues about going back to 2010, because the law department doesn't treat the borough presidents and the community boards like a client like they should, which is why there was a change that she has suggested in 2010, I think, again, more recently. What's interesting about the charter is there's a specific prohibition that says you can't use government resources to support a candidate or a referendum. However, this is not a referendum, it's a ballot question, so the city council's council read that line differently. That being said, over an abundance of caution, since our October email, we've actually been focused a little bit more on education. Along those lines, the council is still reviewing it, but at this point I'm just asking folks to turn over the ballot, and also happy to explain any of the things that happen in the current campaign finance system, and without actually pushing people one way or another, The big fact that I think is interesting for people to know is that $128 million has been given to elected officials in the past 2 election cycles, and half that money was about $70 million. Half that money came in checks of $2,000 or more, and those big checks came from 5% of the donors. And so just as a reminder, and everyone's heard this joke before, has anyone here ever given something worth $2,000 or more? I have, but I expected the person to spend the rest of their life with me. And so every time, and she said yes, our daughter's 8 months old, but the key thing is just that money has strings attached, and I don't know anyone who doesn't. And so, that being said, do what you will. We've been making a lot of progress on the East River Esplanade. We just had a ribbon cutting from 70th to 72nd, which we did with HSS as part of a land use project. We also cut the ribbon on 2 pre-K centers, which gets us up to about 700 or so seats. We still have another 200 or so in the pipeline, which gets the Upper East Side to 900 pre-K seats. If you go to the DOHMH website, they have vital statistics. Under vital statistics, you can look up your community board's vital statistics. And what I found is in Community Board 8, we had 2,577 children born just from our district that will be eligible for pre-K next year, which indicates that we are behind the 8 ball even with the 900 seats. So my hypothesis is, I may be proved wrong, is that we will have more parents apply for the 900 seats than there are seats in our neighborhood. Along those same lines, the city school construction authority has been not building enough school seats. In a meeting with the mayor, when I asked the mayor to build me more school seats, he said, and I'm quoting, "It's no secret that families on the Upper East Side can afford to send their kids to private schools." And so, believe it or not, that is a controversial statement on many reasons, because if you stop people on the street, there are people who I've actually stopped on the street who've said, well, I think that wealthy people shouldn't send their children to public school. I am on the complete other side. I believe that we should send everyone to public school, even if the parent is a billionaire or a millionaire, because I believe in racial desegregation and also socioeconomic desegregation. So I passed a law, which I don't believe the mayor signed, but I think it just aged into law, which requires the SCA to tell us how they come to the belief that there is no new need on the Upper East Side in District 2. District 2 starts on 100th Street, goes all the way down here. Actually, it may be across the street. This is District...
All the way down to the end.
So this building is in District 2?
Yes.
Because I know that parts of Margaret's district are in...
Includes all CB1.
CEC1 has a small... Margaret's district has its own CEC, which I'm slightly jealous about. So anyway, they're saying that there's very little new need, and despite all the constructions, all the cranes, the multiple towers that are going up here. Another piece is we're currently looking at the school buses. The item that got the most attention is putting GPSs on the buses, and that would allow parents to know where their kids are. We also have the new person, Kevin Moran, saying he would use the GPS information to keep the buses showing up on time, so you don't end up with the he said, she said. And I think those are some of the big pieces. Give me one moment. We have a lot of Halloween fun stuff happening in the district. On the East River 50s Alliance, where we rezoned, the BSA overturned the community rezoning. So now we're in court. I was in court on Friday on a temporary restraining order, and we got the developer to agree that for the first 150 feet that they do, they'll actually follow the tower on base proceedings. And then I think it was already referenced, but there was a rally for our neighborhoods on Saturday. I know a lot of folks were there. And it is good to see that this whole thing is becoming a citywide movement. And I think the other piece is you may not be able to be involved at this point on the mayor's commission, because at this point your council is telling you it's on the ballot. But the city council commission has happened. I know that the borough president submitted testimony. I know that the Scott Stringer has submitted testimony. I submitted testimony. Scott put in 65 suggestions. I put in 72 suggestions, but who's counting?
I would
And
probably agree with you on 71.
likely so, because yes. So take a look. We can make it available. I'm happy to come by any community board to talk about it. Right now, they're going to take all the suggestions that they got, and then they will come back in the spring. And so I don't think the door is necessarily closed, so I would just keep getting them things, even if there's not an official piece. And then the other big piece, and I don't know if you have time to spin this around, is the Property Reform Commission is moving forward. I know Gail spoke about it at CB8. We have a hearing on October 23rd. It's at I believe it's at City Hall. But it's nyc.gov/property tax reform. And I'm hoping folks will come and testify about how we can fix it. And I think that was a very long report, but yeah.
On part of the problem, going back to the SCA piece, because District 2 covers so much of Manhattan, when we argue in Chelsea we need more pre-K seats, we say, well, they tell us, well, there were just 900 more pre-K seats added in District 2. So what you were saying about how Councilmember Chin has her own CEC and their own school district down there, is there any way we can divide Manhattan so it's not the entire east side and half of the west side in one school district?
Yes, and I have actually, perhaps we can partner with the borough president on this. As part of redistricting, they're going to redraw the council lines.
Right.
But there's also an opportunity to redraw CEC lines. It only comes around every 10 years. And I have spoken to Shino at CEC2 a couple of years ago. I would recommend us forming, and I would like to be a member if the borough president should be so inclined, a task force on school rezonings. And my suggestion has been to cut CEC2, at least for my purposes, at 59th Street and merge it with CEC4, which would be East Harlem, because that would allow me to integrate the two communities. That being said, I believe you may want to split Midtown from Chelsea.
Downtown Fifth Avenue would be okay too.
Yeah. but either way, it's that's also true. I guess what I was thinking was 59th to 116th, 120th becomes a district that becomes a 60-40 or 50-50, and hopefully with the rezoning in East Harlem, the community. The tax commission meeting is going to be at the Tribeca Performing Arts Center at 6:30 p.m. at 199 Chambers Street, and so we can share the DOMHMH data with you. And we're happy to work with you and support you and your local elected officials in getting you the data you want. And if you'll have me, I'll be happy to be there. We were just very focused on keeping track of the number of seats in the neighborhood. And then we also created UPK at Ben Kalos, where we've been able to identify hundreds, if not thousands, actually just hundreds of parents who need the seats. And then we've been able to just come to DOE and say we have 70 parents who need a seat on Roosevelt Island. We only have 18 seats on Roosevelt Island. And then we worked with a local provider that we came to DOE and said, this provider is willing to apply. And DOE said, we're not allowed to say that we will or won't approve them, but since there's need, we're looking for any applicant. So
when we sat down with SCA and we learned this from our friends at District 2, Janine was great about this. We sat down with SCA and we showed them what the numbers were in Chelsea and in Hell's Kitchen, and they come back and say, but there's so many, we've just added 900 seats in District 2. The fact that you've got 900 seats on the Upper East Side, I know it's not enough. That's great. It does absolutely nothing for our need, but SCA will throw it at us because we're all one district.
I'm happy to work with you on this. I will tell you, each council member gets one ask of the mayor at the budget briefing, and my ask of the mayor for the past 4 or 5 budget cycles has been school seats. The other piece is every time I see an empty storefront, I email SCA. Any space that's 10,000 square feet or more, we email SCA. Every developer who comes to the Upper East Side, whether as of right or seeking a ULURP, I say no to campaign contributions. I say no to like random things they might be offering with my name on it, and I say to them, I need a pre-K center. So that is another key piece, but our seats should not stop you from getting yours, and it is just a key of, there's a pre-K directory, pull from the directory to see how many of the seats are in your neighborhood. I also passed another law that tells us exactly how many children apply for every pre-K seat. So take that to say this is how many applications we have. And then you're able to say we had 900 applicants for 500 seats, and in this neighborhood, they will likely start sending kids out of the neighborhood and say, oh, we assigned them on, they usually assign them down here because there's more seats than they need. And that at that point you gather the families who say, with kids saying we have to commute an hour in each direction every day, which is 4 hours of travel for a parent, and we bring them to the SCA and DOE and say, do we need to tell this story in public, in front of the press? And then they generally have been more responsive.
Yeah, we've been doing all of this, and you know, as I said, we learned most of this from the 75 Morton thing, because Janine figured out how all of this works.
Yeah.
But you talk to SCA, and they see when they want to hide, they see all of District 2 as one district.
Keep pushing.
Yep.
Continuing District 2 for one more moment. So back in the days before Gail Brewer became borough president, the NYU came before their massive rezoning, and here in this room said, 2 years before the ULURP, we will build the core and shell of a new school, 100,000 square foot school, on a site on the super blocks, and borough president at the time, Scott Stringer, said, good, the school's off the table, we're getting that, now we can talk about the rezoning. That was in 2010, 8 years later, core and what? Shell, who? No, wasn't us. So while dealing, looking for schools, and of course we always need school seats, and also when there is even a slight oversupply, which is always temporary, right? Because a good school will bring kids from everywhere. The great news is that does encourage diversity, because people do come from other neighborhoods if a neighborhood itself isn't diverse. So any way that anyone who wants to engage can help us hold NYU to their commitment, we would get 100,000 square foot school, including pre-K, and that would perhaps alleviate. So we've got a site.
Which district is it in?
CD2?
No, who's
CB2?
the NYU site? Is it in Carlina or Corey?
Margaret.
Okay. So we are way out of my district, and I currently only represent 3 of the boards at the table, but I'm happy to support the borough president.
To be fair, you opened the door a crack. I'm gonna
It's important for all these issues to be heard by the borough president so that we can work together, and if the borough president forms a task force on this, or committee, or working group, or what have you, I'd be happy to support my borough president.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sorry to ask, what's the details on the Tribeca Performing Arts event?
I don't know my chief of staff's password.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I want to move us along because
Just 1 second about the council, the charter, because I asked all of the committee chairs to submit their recommendations for city charter based on what their committees might need, and have been compiling that to submit. So that's just a suggestion of how other boards might want to go about it.
Wonderful.
Marley, thank you.
Thank you. So Padmore had to leave because of work, and so he wanted me to give the CB9 report. CB9 is preparing for budget consultations the last week of October to allow for discussion of their budget priorities. I don't know if everyone has heard, but the board was successful in halting the implementation of a methadone clinic in a residential area of CB9, Argus. They are now meeting and holding consultations with the clinic and block associations that were also successful in blocking this to determine the best ways to move forward. The board is extremely supportive of having the methadone clinic, just not on a residential block. So they're looking, along with the council member and also Athena Moore from our office, what other viable locations in the neighborhood can support this. They are also looking at developing a network of service providers to support formerly incarcerated returning citizens to CB9. I don't know if everyone remembers, CB9 brought the Brooklyn Bail Fund here to present back in the spring, and so they're wanting to continue this work. Everyone got the card for the new women's building president, but this is all part of that same work. How do we incorporate folks, back into our communities? How do we provide them with resources, skills, jobs, that kind of thing? And then finally, he just wanted to say thank you and best of luck to me, which is very sweet. Okay, John, CB10.
Hi, I'm John Lynch, First Vice Chair of CB10. Big issue in our district has been a proposed development by Mount Sinai Hospital on 124th Street. It's been a little messy. They came to our land use committee on their ULURP, and the committee ultimately voted to support it. That caused a lot of community uproar. It appears that there may have been some, I'll say, miscommunication in terms of what the actual use of this facility would be. I mean, they want to basically build above an existing garage. But it turns out they're going to be providing facilities, drug treatment, and other medical facilities, which are all great, but it wasn't what we understood fully was going to be going there. It turns out that that BSA has sort of sent them back for probably unrelated reasons. So we're trying to kind of rework what is going in there and kind of get a better idea and maybe condition our support on some changes. We also have in our board a several-year-old moratorium on the placement of these kind of social services and homeless shelters and medical facilities. That block itself already has several similar facilities. So anyway, we're kind of trying to revisit all of that and have further discussions with Mount Sinai. We have some interesting forums coming up. Our Economic Development Committee is looking into doing a forum in this coming March of 2019, which will be Women's Month, a forum addressing the income inequality, which we all know on many levels, but specifically the income inequality between women of color and non-women of color, which apparently is both the largest income gap and the fastest growing or slower to recede, depending on the point of view. So that should be a very interesting discussion that we're going to look to do in March. We also have, we're in the middle, depending on how you place your date, 2018, 2019, is the 100th anniversary of the Harlem Renaissance. I know that Athena is involved in some efforts, and we've been speaking with them. So we want to plan activities around that, having monthly sort of historical minutes, as it were, or speakers at our general board meeting. We had a successful Black Theater Forum a couple of months ago, which the borough president attended and spoke at. It was wildly successful, and we are looking to replicate that on a citywide basis. Instead of just focusing on our Upper Manhattan area, we want to bring in people from all 5 boroughs to talk about the needs and the shortages and the issues regarding Black theater and arts in New York City. I think that might be it for us.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Xavier, CB11.
Thank you. Nilsa couldn't be here today. She sends her regards. She's out of town at the moment. First, thank you to BP Brewer for coming to attend our full board and give her report in person. We appreciate that. To Lucille, thank you very much for your service. And to Terri as well. Thank you. But without Lucille, where would we be? Right? So a couple things I'll try to run down as quickly as possible. We are assembling our charter revision task force. We're identifying members who have the bandwidth to actually work on it. And that will be coming to fruition very soon. In addition, we are carrying on with our Second Avenue Subway Task Force for Phase 2. Alita Camp was kind enough to introduce us to the key people who oversaw Phase 1, and we will be reaching out to them and to assign a member, hopefully from CB8 and one from our neighbor in Central Harlem, because the train will actually terminate there. We also had a presentation of full board talking about one of the, I would say, processing centers in the 25th precinct, where they would take low-level offenders for drug offenses, and they would be taken in for 5 days and then referred to resources within either the city. There were a lot of concerns there because we already have the lion's share in our community, and it's not too far from the bus from Randall's Ward Island. So a lot of people had concerns over that. This past Monday, we attended the Unity Rally with Scott Stringer. I'm sure many of you heard about the Proud Boys event and the assaults that happened. Both Nilsson and I were there. May not have been mentioned while I was out just a moment ago. Padmore and the coalition working towards the removal of the Marion J. Sims statues. We are now carrying on and having an event coming up called Beyond Sims. It's a community conversation. I just sent the flyer to both you, Aldrin and Lucille, if we could get that forwarded out. That will be we will be having it at the New York Academy of Medicine this Saturday from 1 to 3:30. So please come out. This is where we want to engage and hear more of the community's opinions when what we should put back in that place, you know, to replace the Sims statue. Let's see. We are also having a regional affordable fair housing summit. It's a continuation of our NYCHA housing forums and our housing forums in general as part of our brand to let people know what's happening in the community. As you all know, we went through rezoning and affordable housing. The only thing that there's a dearth of it. So we're trying to engage people to come out. I'll give you that date real quick. That's going to be coming up in November, and that'll be the 29th, so it's the week after Thanksgiving. It's Thursday the 29th from 5:30 to 8:30 to the Museum in the City of New York. We will have Matthew Gross from Urban Buildings Collaborative, George James, who's our consultant, Robert Rodriguez from our Assembly District, Jeremiah Schlittman, who's from Legal Aid Society and also a community board member, and we're waiting to hear back from NYCHA as well. The other thing Nelson wanted me to mention, we will have the Latin Roots East Harlem exhibition, and that ends January 31st, so please come out. And we have our ongoing East Harlem Resiliency Study. And two final notes. We passed our Statement of District Needs and Budget. We had gone through a year and a half of refining and creating a brand new process, and we are now at cruising altitude and no more turbulence. And so it passed without too much uproar. And many years past, people would raise a ruckus, say, what about this, what about this? And we've actually instituted a process now where everyone can participate, and if they don't participate, well, we carry on. And finally, we're working with Council Member Diana Yalas for emergency preparedness with NYCHA for loss of heat and hot water. We've had one meeting, we're going to have another one. So hopefully we can prevent phone calls on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and Boxing Day with people saying, I have no heat and hot water, or even cold water. So that's our update. So bit of a brain dump, but I hope I covered everything.
No, this is wonderful. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
I'm sorry, Lucille, is there, affordable housing, or the lack of it, affects every single community board in the city? Is there something that we could do, Manhattan, with all of the community boards together on affordable housing and the need, or something to?
Yeah, sounds like a symposium is
something
needed.
to transition for your replacement. It would be good if we could do that, because
Yes.
it's just not, it's going down.
Yeah, one quick note on that. We've always kind of maintained when public land, we should really be driving towards it being 100% affordable. And what we're looking at with some of our current projects is, and working with George, is how we can actually activate the lower economic bands, because you have to offset it somehow. But in our neighborhood, 120% of AMI, 150%, that's not what people are living on right now. So that is something that I think would be great for all of us to work with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
CB12.
I'm Richard Lewis, First Vice Chair. Candidate Judge Shaw could not be here. He is wrapping up his law practice. So I will give you a brief summary of what we've done since our last meeting. We had our first, the Fort Tryon Medieval Festival was a success, which was held September 30th. A tremendous success in terms of a lot of people who showed up, and of course it will continue next year. We had our first meeting of the New York City X Collabs, which is part of the mayor's initiative with the Chief Officer of Technology. Some 50 community stakeholders were involved in this all-day focus group, and there's some planning for other meetings that will take place. We're in the midst of rolling out our live streaming in our conference room, and tied into that, I will be going today, as I did yesterday, to the NAB, which is the National Association of Broadcasting Convention at Javits, and also tied to that is the AES, which is the Acoustical Engineer Society's meeting as well. This is a great thing for looking at all the technology that's coming and available networking that we can do. DoIT is decided to use Business Spectrum, and so now we have our new modems and our new internet connections are with Spectrum, and tied into that, they also are moving towards putting in telephone systems with all community boards. So we have a first scoping meeting in terms of what we're going to do with our telephone system. I think it's Windchime is the system that they're using, and we have to look at certain features that they will do. It's a VoIP, a VoIP system, and so we have to look at some redundancy in case it does go down. That is, if the entire network go down, we should have some backup. So it's in the works, and the rollout has not taken place. We are in the midst of our budget consultations. In fact, Tuesday's meeting, general meeting, we will finalize that. And we have passed several educational resolutions. One, which was our position on opposing the city charter's recommendations regarding term limits and the Civic Engagement Commission. And to just quote, I think this was the strongest resolution we've ever passed. There was a quote at the end of it in terms of the whereas that we stated that creating the...
So, before you even go there...
This is a part of our educational
campaign.
Public,
okay.
It's a public document.
Okay, just
and it's a
making
public
sure.
document already. We said creating the CEC, and I'll read it, is a cynical power grab aimed at weakening both community boards and borough presidents. And so we very strongly feel that that was part of our educational campaign, and we feel that the public should know about it as best we can, and we don't feel that we are violating any laws in terms of the way the resolution was written, and you will have a copy if you didn't get one shortly.
Wonderful. I just wanted to just say for, if you're passing district statement of needs and all of that, please make sure that your liaison has a copy of that so that we can read them. That was always like a really great winter activity for me, to sit on the train and read all the district statement of needs. And
before we pass them, we can still send them to you.
well, after they get passed, that's when you should send them. So once you all, agree and vote, and when you send them to city planning, you should also make sure that our office has a copy so that we can be reading. And then also, if, because some boards put them on their websites, but please, once everything has been, please put it on the website. For us, that is a really important way when we do recruitment. We ask people, have you read the district statement of needs? And I don't want to put anyone on a community board that has not even done that as the bare minimum to read the needs.
It's actually on the application.
It is on the application?
I just want, before we conclude, I just want to say, as you all know, this is Lucille's last Borough Board, so continue to communicate with your liaisons. If you don't have a liaison assigned yet, you definitely feel free to communicate with me. You could not have had a stronger, a stauncher supporter of community boards and all the issues that you grapple with than Lucille has been. Imagine the passions and the fervor that keep you until midnight, 11 at night, Imagine that magnified times 12, and still having the same passion, the same concern, the same urgency that you have for your issue, whether it's SLA, which he convened a special forum with the chair of SLA, whether it's all the transportation issues from bike lanes to ferries to L train to the 2nd Avenue line. Imagine all the issues in terms of the equity around siting public facilities, in terms of the New York links, in terms of when we started with Vision Zero. Like, there cannot be an issue that you've dealt with and that you've resolved on that she has not made sure our office was an advocate for, was present at, and was helping to support the work, and felt the same way and gave the same dedication to your district office staff. You know, she possesses this unique skill set and ability, because it's not only the attention to detail and like the issues, but she's a great people person too, in terms of being able to network and being able to make people feel very comfortable to come with her with all kinds of issues, and nothing was too small and nothing was too big for her to sit down, take time, and listen, and then make sure that our office responded and knew about. So I ask for your patience in the next couple of weeks and months, because know that you know, Lucille also has grown in the role, and you know, she's exiting at the top of her game here. Somewhat of this seems effortless, right? The way she does it, and all the information she retains, and the proper contact people, and the alphabet soup of what is, you know, city agencies, right? Including, I'm still not comfortable with calling sanitation Disney, but you know, some people refer to that. But it's been, you know, a real pleasure just having her as a partner and working with her in this office, and trying to really put the work and elevate and lift the work of community boards. That is a signature priority for Gail Brewer and this office, and she brings in and attracts staff that really respects the work of the community boards, respects the people who are doing it, and respect the staff that are entrusted to represent on your behalf. And Lucille's, you know, has just done that with grace and with.
Stop it. Okay.
Humor.
Too much.
She's done it.
Okay.
You know, it's just been a real pleasure to work with her, and I know you've all had similar experiences. So I just want to personally, on behalf of the Office of Borough President.
Thank you.
To finish my report. And on
I'm sorry, I didn't know you had to finish that.
And on a happier note, we did pass a resolution relating to a further educational situation for all the various policies on marijuana smoking and marijuana use. We think that it is still.
That we're getting it out free at CB12.
It's still illegal, and we don't want our youth to feel it's okay, even though the Western prosecutions have changed in terms of the DA. And so we want all agencies and all borough presidents to communicate the rules as such. They're very simple, and the resolution states that, and I think you'll get a copy. It's already not posted.
Okay. So. Thank you.
And again, with everyone telling you, stay in touch.
I'm not going far. I'll be right down, literally down at 2 Broadway. Before we wrap up, I just want to, yes.
I had one quick thing. I had said during the very first presentation, or the EDC presentation, that I was going to check with the Land Use Committee. I did get a report back from the Land Use Committee. They approved it unanimously. There were no issues. So when this body votes next month, you know, Burt will be here. He'll be able to tell you that. But just so you all know that the Chelsea Land Use Committee approved it with no issues.
We don't vote.
So
okay,
I just wanted to, I know that there's a few new council staffers that are here. Can folks just wave your hand and say hello?
Which councilman?
Jessica told me that there were council people that were here, new staffers that needed to be introduced.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not a staffer, I'm just part-time. But my name is Robert. I'm here from Councilman Keith Powers' office.
Okay. Wonderful.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
My name is Brittany. I'm the constituent coordinator at Speaker Johnson's office.
Wonderful. All right. So with
Motion
that
to
being
adjourn?
said, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second. Have a wonderful day.
Yay.